Hi. Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Shamshir Sound video. Hope you guys are doing great. Today we're going to talk about using Fabfilter Pro-Q3, and we're using like two EQs and they turn on for drop A. One turns on for drop A and then the other one turns on for drop B. So I called it like high EQ and the low EQ. Why am I doing this and how will it help you guys? So this is great if you're doing like drop A and drop B, or some call a call and response, or a question and an answer. You know, when you have a drop that's like dun 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 dun. You know, the call and response, the classic. It's becoming very popular because it really gives more motion to the drop and more variation. Now, one thing is that if you guys do it, like I've done this a lot where I play my MIDI for a bit and then I play my MIDI one octave above or one octave below, right? We just move the notes down and we keep our processing the way it is. Well, instead of making it too difficult, because either we can become lazy and just do that, right? Move it down or up accordingly. But if we move it down, think about it. If we move something down, it's going to have more low end frequency, right? If we move it from C5 to C4 and it's playing those notes, it's going to have more low end frequency and lacking high end energy. In contrast, if we move that from C5 to C6, it's going to have more high end energy, but it's going to be lacking some of those mids that give it that power and that give it that energy. John Christian talks really about the importance of the mids and saying that when you hear a track and the lead is cutting through really well, you can really give it the credit to the mids and the low mids rather than like just the hiss and the air at the end. And so coming back to this point, what we want to do is we want to have like an automation that turns on for drop A and then an automation that turns on for drop B. And so that's what's going on with this high Q3 and low Q3. So I just renamed these. During this first segment here, the high Q3 kicks into place and is doing dynamic EQ, and we'll explain what that's doing. During the second part of the drop, it's a different brass sample and it's doing the low Q3. Alternatively, you can also use like parametric EQ2 and automate the mix amount. Some people do that, so they automated the mix amount. And how that looks like is they would just create a automation clip and do 100% and then just turn it off vertical slope. What we're doing here is we're leaving the mix amount for both of these full. But what we're actually automating is this, the gain scale. So the gain scale for Pro Q3, you can see there as I turn it on from 0. It's kind of like a dry wet, not the exact same as dry wet because you can do a scale from 0 to 100, so that would be 50% for an automation clip, or 200, depending on how extreme you want to go. And if we look back at the drop, so let's just play this drop here. Right, so my gain amount is going to 100%. One thing about this gain amount is that the gain amount, even though it's like a dry wet, it's affecting more so bell curves, shelf curves, and dynamic. So I have some dynamic shelving EQ. I have some bell curves that are giving some boosts. I'm kind of sweetening it, right? Because alternatively, like if I just play this drop off, it's only a subtle difference, but what I'm doing with this and the takeaway with this video, so let's turn it back on, is I'm sweetening it dynamically, which two ways is that we're doing it with dynamic EQ, right, instead of static choices. But there are static choices here that we have which are important because this gain scale, even if gain scale is at 0%, this high pass filter is still in effect. Same thing for drop B here. So even for drop B, the cutoff right there for the low cut is still static. And what do I mean by that? That means that even if even if this is at 0%, so even with that at 0%, be careful about the cuts that you do and the EQ decisions that you do, because gain amounts, the gain scale isn't like purely like a dry wet. Instead, it decides how much leeway. It's almost think about it as like a ratio. Like, what's the min max? Okay, we can go like 50% of whatever we were doing. If I was doing subtractive EQ and going in the opposite direction, that would be reflective when I increase the gain scale. So the gain scale is a great way for you to do like technical decisions where you want a little bit more modularity, you want a little bit more power, because my goal with this was to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to mute this so I can talk to you guys while this goes on. Hey, during this first part, it sounds nice. I want a little bit of sweetening. And during the second part, I want a different EQ. It needs a little bit more low mid. It needs a little bit more, I could have went a little bit more extra too. And here we are again, coming back to the beginning one. The beginning one having good mid energy, and then we're about to jump to B. So you can see B has its own thing. It needs a lot more high end. So that way you can make creative decisions without sacrificing the source sound and without making it too cumbersome to put like its own effects rack. Because if I did that with this, there was just a lot of processing going into a wet signal and then going into a mixed signal. So to do that would be quite heavy on RAM and heavy on CPU. So instead of doing that, why not set up 2 Pro-Q3s and do like some dynamic EQ decisions? Or even if it's not dynamic EQ, you could even do something like this. I'll show you guys. So it doesn't have to be dynamic EQ. You could do like, I don't know, like a curve like that, right? And that curve will be off, right? Because the gain scale, if it's at 0%, it won't take effect. It's more so those static decisions. If you do something like a cut, like a low cut or a high cut, those will be unaffected by gain mix and will have permanence and will be always on. So this is a great way that you can do that. You can clean up the way that your sound is going into the chain, and it gives you a lot more power, because like I said, if you move it 1 octave higher, you're going to be losing low end energy and you need to compensate. And if you move it 1 octave lower, you're going to have a downside like that. Let's show you guys, like, if I was going to set this up fresh, what that would look like. So let's just pretend that for the first 4 bars, I have a low melody. And for the next 4 bars, or these, the last bit here, I have a high melody. So I'm going to make a low EQ and I'm going to make a high EQ, okay? So suppose I put in Pro-Q3 and I'm thinking, you know what? This sound, it has some good, high end. It has some good low end, but it needs a little bit of high end. I'm going to do this. So this is just all as an example, okay? This is all just a theory. So I could do that, right? And then I could modify this, make an automation clip for it, okay? Hopefully it doesn't interfere with the existing modification. Now you could do 100%, but that's going to be 200% scale. Here I'm just going to do 50%. Okay, so now we have this, and think about this as like EQ for low lead. Oh, that didn't work. Anyways, I tried to rename it. Anyways, let's just add the next one. And this one will be the EQ for the high lead. So let's say like the high lead is lacking some lows and mids because you've moved it up 1 octave. So then you can do something like this. Maybe you were like, oh, a little bit of boost. Maybe you were changing it, It's art at the end of the day. It's whatever you want to do with it. So again, I'm going to make a automation clip. So just like the other one, but you're doing the opposite. Doing the opposite this time. Right? And I hope this makes some sense of what that would look like. Now this way, if we keep this EQ up, let's just make it, it's detached. So you can see during the low lead, it's not going to kick into effect, but during the high, it will. Now, do you want to make that like this, or do you want to make that dynamic? That's totally up to you what you want to do. If I wanted to make these gain adjustments dynamic, I would probably put these at 0 dB, okay, and find where I like it being boosted and make those changes accordingly. Maybe I want to cut, maybe I want to do a huge boost here, and that way you can see it doesn't take effect until I reach that. And this is such a great way that you guys can cut down on CPU resources, but also spice up the drop without making sacrifices technically, because a lot of times we want to come out of our creative limitations, but there are some technical limitations, being that if we go crazy up, too much high end, and lacking low. If we go crazy low, too much low end interfering with the sub. And if we think about that, right, like let's say if the beginning one had too much low end, but we were like, no, I like this, it's crazy, it's sounding dope, I would do something like a low shelf, you know, and find that sweet spot where, you know, it's not cutting too much of the mix. So that way I could have something like that. Don't copy these values by any means. These are just showing like examples of how we would choose something. Right? Let's say I didn't want to do dynamic EQ and I just wanted to do dynamic EQ for the bit. So that way we can see here. So you can see that when the drop hits, this is the EQ curve that's taken effect. Gain mix is at 50% or 100. And then when the next drop parts where it has a lot of high end but lacking low mid, Fabfilter Pro-Q3 can assist. Now, like I said, just as a wrap up, you can do this alternatively with parametric EQ. Instead of automating the gain scale, you'd be automating the mix amounts. Last thing that I wanted to touch base on was also the dynamic EQ. It's up to you. You want to do dynamic or if you want to do static. In my opinion, dynamic EQ is a little bit more difficult to set up, but it's more rewarding and it sounds sweeter and better. So I hope you guys liked this video. I just wanted to touch base on some technical tips that can help expand your workflow and break through some of those technical limitations. I especially like Pro-Q3 because parametric EQ, though I use it a lot, and I'm talking about parametric EQ too, though I use it a lot, it does have a certain character. And as you start doing a lot of processing, you might not want that character at a given time. And that's where Pro-Q3 with the zero latency is super transparent. Pro-Q3 in its stock state, right, with nothing happening, whether there's nothing being added here or if nothing is being turned on in the gain scale, is extremely transparent. And so it comes in clutch, it comes in handy for these type of situations. So just wanted to share those technical tips. Thank you guys a lot for your support. Hope you guys have an excellent day. It's a sunny day today, so gonna make the most of it with a nice run during the afternoon. And make sure you guys hit that like button if you did like it. If you didn't like it, please let me know why. Hit that dislike button. And make sure you guys are subscribed with the notification bell on. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.